Why don't you get started sharing your story about overcoming narcissistic abuse?
Sure. So when I was 19, I was in my first real relationship, and it started out like every relationship, very thoughtful. He was charming and kind and romantic, would do these big romantic gestures, which I now understand as love bombing, but at the time I didn't. And as we progressed in the relationship, he just got worse and worse, right? So it started with a little bit of verbal abuse and then escalated to psychological abuse and then physical abuse and sexual abuse. So I ended up getting caught in this big cycle where my first ever experiences with a relationship, with romantic love, with, anything sexual were very toxic. And it rewrote how I understood relationships, how I understood sexuality. And it really impacted future choices that I made in other areas of my life, but also in future relationships. And so when I started recognizing his patterns and finally got out of there, I was able to see the red flags and understand more. But everybody has and shows different red flags, right? There's so many different toxic behaviors. And so I just kept coming into contact with new and worse people who would exhibit new and worse behaviors until I was able to build up my self-esteem, until I was able to release what was happening to me, and fully understand that I wasn't alone here. Other people had experienced what I experienced. So I started talking more and more about it. And that's how I understood that other people were experiencing it, but also started to feel more confident in it. Then I started building up my confidence because I knew I was worthy. I did have value, that I was worth love. And then I started to rebuild the people around me and surround myself with the healthier people who weren't also toxic for me, because that was the energy and the type of people I was attracting. Rebuilt my environment, my friend group, everything. And those ended up being my 3 R's, which make up my healing from emotional abuse philosophy. There's release, resilience, rebuild.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you diving into your story and how you've overcome that. So let's talk about, like, how did you then, after overcoming your own narcissistic abuse, how did you get into the field of helping people survive from emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse, those kinds of things?
Sure. So when I first started telling people about it, about what I was going through or what I had experienced, they started sharing back. And I realized how common it was. So I started writing a book that would basically serve as a manual for people who had experienced sexual and domestic abuse and help them overcome it. And as I was writing my stories down and talking to other people about my stories, they started sharing their stories. So I asked them if I could include their stories in my book. And everybody knew somebody. So this big, giant networking web started to form. So my first book, instead of just a manual, became this huge resource. It was 20 survivors, including myself, with over 40 stories of abuse. And then I started incorporating other people, so parents of people who've been abused and friends and significant others of people who've been abused, because I wanted to serve as an advocate manual as well. So people who may not have experienced it can help other people understand what they've experienced and be more educated in what happens to people after they've been abused. And then I started branching out more and involved SANE nurses and detectives and prosecutors. And that's how I got into this. I got into it because I realized how big this problem was and nobody was talking about it. And the more we talked about it, the more we shared, the more people were positively impacted. And so I wanted to get bigger and bigger. I opened a nonprofit called Within Your Reach. I have a speaking business where I go around to universities and organizations and talk to them about what are toxic relationships and toxic traits, sexual abuse and domestic violence, and all these things so that they can make more informed decisions, understanding the red flags to look for. And I'm a coach. I have a podcast that's all over the world. So that's how I got into this, because there was a need and I wanted to address it.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And it's always interesting to, right, sometimes when we feel so alone in our experience, then to be able to reach out and see all these other people, right, like who have experienced similar things, and how great that is for, I think, anyone's healing process, just to get that they can relate to others in their experience too. So you mentioned, right, the 3 R's. I love it if you go a little deeper into your philosophy. So, right, it's called the Healing from Emotional Abuse philosophy. Could you share a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So the the healing from emotional abuse philosophy is my 3-step healing methodology. And so it starts with release. You have to release your story, because once you release it and you let go of everything that you've been holding on to, all the toxicity that's inside you, you start to feel better and more motivated and understood and validated. So then when you release and understand that people can relate to you and that you're not alone here, you can start to build your confidence, which is resilience. So resilience is building confidence and self-esteem and self-love, surrounding yourself with this shield of empowerment. And then you move on to rebuild, where you make better choices in the people you surround yourself with and the things that are in your house, and you get rid of the clutter and the negative self-talk, and you basically rebuild yourself and your surroundings from the inside out.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about those R's. Do you have any activities, exercises, something that our AVAIYA students could take on even right now to help them get started in this healing journey?
Of course. So one of my favorite exercises that I use to start out with people who want to build resilience, because I think that once we start to see that there's a silver lining, we're really ready to take the first step. So everybody take out your cell phones and you open your alarm app, and you make an alarm for 10 minutes after your wake up alarm in the morning. And as the subject for the alarm, write one thing that you love about yourself. It could be something physical, it could be something emotional, it can be something spiritual, anything that you love about yourself. So I love my smile, I love my hair, I love my personality, I love my friends, I love anything that would make you feel that self-love, that little snap of self-love. I want you to write that as the subject and set that for 10 minutes after you wake up. And then I want you to take the same sentence or the same sentiment and make a second alarm for lunchtime, whatever time that is for you, noon, 1, 12:30, whatever. And then again for 20 minutes before you go to sleep, or right before your nighttime routine starts, same sentence. And I want you to set it Monday through Sunday, so that every day you're reminded 3 times about this thing that you love about yourself, and you let it ring. And then I want you to read it and really feel it every time you see it. And so once you start to do that, after a couple of days, you'll just feel better, and you won't really know why. But the more you do it, the stronger you'll feel, and the more likely you are to take your first step in healing.